up, Mike?
What's up, Mike? What's up, Mike?
Apparently this place is what's up, right? Like, look at us all.
Absolutely.
Like, happy clean day to everybody here.
That's right.
Like, I want to say that first and foremost, you know. And a little special attention to the folks that took some clean time tonight. You know, especially our newcomer that came up and identified themselves. Welcome. Please, keep coming back. You're welcome here no matter what. I always like to start out when I share with my experience behind the third tradition. You see, I was first introduced to Narcotics Anonymous in 1980. And I had gotten busted selling 15 pounds of pot to a Costa Mesa police officer because I was one of those smart addicts. Like, you know, I had it all figured out, knew who to watch out for and all that. And as I was going through the process of sentencing and court and all that stuff, my attorney had asked me if I was clean. And you know, this is about 8 months into my case. And I said, well, yeah, you know, like I haven't used since the day I got arrested. And, you know, what I'd done is I quit hanging out with any of my friends. I had a little job at the car wash, and I would come home and I would sit on the couch and I'd watch TV and I wouldn't use. And that included the liquid drugs. And, like, I was staying clean out of straight fear. Because, see, when I got busted, I got released, I got bailed out like I always did. And a couple of days later, my sister's boyfriend, who was a Huntington Beach police officer, came to my mom's house, where I always lived, and took me out to lunch and proceeded to explain to me like what happens to 160-pound, 18-year-old, long blonde hair down to the middle of their back young men in prison. And, you know, whose wife I was going to be and all that kind of fun stuff. And it scared the shit out of me. Like, I was terrified. You know, when that happened, like, I was like, no way. Like, one, I don't really like to fight unless you back me into a corner. You know, and two, you know, no offense to anybody that might find a different, you know, gender-specific kind of thing. Like, that's not for me. And, so as a result, I got a little clean time. And when my attorney asked me about like whether I'd been using or not, I told him no. You know, like it's been over 8 months. And he said, okay, well, I want you to go down to the local Santa Ana courthouse and talk to this lady in the probation department. She'll give you a schedule and a little court card to get signed. And you get that signed, go to some meetings, get that signed, and we'll be able to present that to the judge at the time of your sentencing, hopefully get you a reduced sentence. And I was like, okay, cool. Because he was telling me that I was looking at 5 years. And I was like, oh, shit. And, you know, so I went and got this card, and I showed up at my first NA meeting. And it was at a little place in Anaheim, across the street from Disneyland. And I remember showing up at this meeting, and I walked in and I got some coffee, and there was like maybe 7 people there, and I think 3 of them were women. And one of these women had the most humongous tits I'd ever seen. And I'm sorry, but like this poor lady, I made her really uncomfortable. Because that's where I come from. That's what I knew how to do. You know, I got my coffee, I sat there and I stared at this lady and I listened to the people who cuss. You know, and every once in a while a cuss word would come in and I'd get my attention and I understood. You know, I remember leaving that meeting that night going, well, this wasn't so bad, right? And, you know, like I came back the following week and I got my coffee and I sat down and that lady was wearing a big, thick jacket. She apparently, you know, wanted to be comfortable. And, like, see, there's a part in our literature that talks about how we lived at the animal level, man. Like, we never really learned how to be a part of society. And that's kind of like a part of my development there, you know. Like, I didn't really know how to treat women. And, you know, so this is 1980. I show up, and I go to these meetings. And I go to, like, 3 of them, and I'm starting to think, this isn't so bad. Because, remember, I'm not hanging out with any of my friends. I don't have anybody to, like, you know, that I feel like I can hang out with that's not loaded. And so, like, you know, I'm hearing people talk about keep coming back, and you might want to hang out with the winners, and you know, it's a good idea to not go into the barber shop because you might get a haircut and all this kind of stuff that we talk about, right? And I'm thinking, what the hell, this isn't so bad. I think I will keep coming back. And my attorney had asked me to get six meetings worth of signatures. So I go to the fourth meeting, and I'm, by now at the end of the meeting, I'm kind of talking to the secretary a little bit. He's talking to me, and I'm kind of like, what's happening is I'm starting to kind of think about taking my place in Narcotics Anonymous. Kind of starting to think about taking my chair. This becoming my home. And the fourth, fifth meeting goes by, and like me and the secretary are talking like each meeting afterwards a little bit, and I'm kind of seeing some likenesses, some stuff that instead of like the differences, I'm seeing some likenesses. And I go to the sixth meeting, and the whole meeting goes on, and everybody shares except me, and I'm the last one, and there's a little time left. And the secretary asks me, he says, "Hey, Mike, we haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to share?" And like I've never had the whole fear of crowd thing. Like I'm like this, like ham. Like I don't care. Like I can jump up on stage and do cartwheels. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care whether you like it or not. And so I start sharing, and the only thing I knew about sharing about was like how I used and what I used and who I used with and where I used and all the things that really don't matter in Narcotics Anonymous. All the things that really don't help in our recovery. And I got about 3 minutes into my share, and some guy that was laying on the ground in a corner of the room with a blanket, shivering, obviously like kicking some pretty hardcore drugs, yells out in the middle of what I'm saying. He says, "Man, why don't you shut the fuck up? You never slammed dope." And it stopped me, like boom. And I went, "Yeah, but I did acid for 90 days straight." And like I tried to qualify. You see, I didn't know that we have a third tradition. Even though I'd been to meetings and I heard people read it at every meeting, like I didn't know that we had a third tradition. I didn't know what it meant. Okay, and it's a really important, it's a huge part of my recovery. Because that third tradition is what made it possible for me 15 years later to come back and get clean on April 1st, 1995. And I've been clean ever since. And see, that third tradition says that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. It doesn't say that you have to have this, you have to work steps, you have to have a sponsor, it says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. That means that those doors are open all the time. No matter what. You can come for 5 minutes, hang out, flash some nasty looks at people, and turn around and split. You can come in, you can meet somebody you plan on meeting here for dinner, and split. You can come in, you can say hello, grab some hugs, run off to work. Or you can come in and sit down and pay attention. You might learn a little something. One of the things that I like to remind myself of all the time is that there are 24 hours in a day. And one of the principles I was taught really early was that if I'm not willing to put at least half as much into my recovery as I did into my using, then I don't deserve to bitch if it doesn't work. You see, I used hardcore, full-on, 380% all the time. No matter what. I ran at it. When I was a little kid, like my buddy's kid Sean, like when I was that age, and I played, I wasn't able to play football. My parents couldn't afford to put me into it. But what I was able to do was at school, we played kill the guy with the ball. It used to be called a really inappropriate name called smear the queer. And there'd be a ball, and somebody grab it, and everybody tackle this guy. And I was always the one that was running the hardest and hitting the hardest. And that's the way that I always did everything. Whatever I wanted to do, whatever I became enthusiastic about, I pushed hard. And when it came to being a loadie, being a stoner, getting high, that's what I did. I ran at it, and I ran hard, and I pushed through. So after my experience at that meeting in 1980, I left. I walked away. And I remember, I've always kind of had this relationship with my misunderstanding of a higher power growing up. I grew up in a parochial school going to a couple different parochial schools, and you know, I've always been exposed to some different theologies and stuff that raised questions. And I could never, ever get what I felt was a straight answer from people when I raised questions. And I was told about things like, well, just have faith. You know, you got to just believe that what we're telling you is the way it is, you know. And I've always been the kind of person that I believe in stuff I can hold. I believe in things that I can see absolute evidence of, that I can't argue with. You know, so, you know, this thing that happened in 1980 is when that person pointed out that I was different from everybody else, and not just that, but that I bought into it because I didn't have knowledge of our third tradition. Like, it separated me. It made me feel apart from and not a part of. Though the secretary at the end of the meeting came to me and said, hey man, you know, never mind what that guy said. You're welcome here. You know, you're welcome here. You can be here if you want to be here. You don't have to qualify. I had already closed my mind. You see, and what happened was that, you know, on the way out to my car that night, you know, because I'd already planned on continuing to come to Narcotics Anonymous. I felt comfortable here. You know, you guys cussed like I did. You spoke my language. You know, and in between some of the cussing, I heard people talk about fear, and I heard people talk about anger, and I heard people talk about, you know, their feelings being hurt. And I'd never been anywhere where people talked about that, ever. And that caught my attention, and, you know. And what happened on my way out to the car that night is I said, okay, God, I guess I just need to experience a little more before I can help these people. Right? Like, I was so arrogant that I believed that I was the Savior, and it was time for me to, you know, rise above and be that person. And you know what? Like, nah, far from it. For another 15 years, I spent out there doing what I do. You know, I compromised every single one of the principles that I was raised with that I swore I'd never do. The one thing I never did do is I never used drugs intravenously. Never slammed dope. And I'm standing here today with 20 years. You know, so like, I still, like, when I got here this time, I was so desperate as a result of the actions that I had carried out and the way I felt about myself, it didn't matter. Like, one thing that did happen is that when I showed up in 1995, I came in and I took my seat. I showed up right out of jail, within hours out of jail, sat my ass in the chair at a little place in Oceanside, 514 North Coast Highway, some people might remember it, and like, I took my seat. And I sat down, and I remember one of the first times I shared, I said, I don't give a what you guys do. I'm staying. You can all go out and get loaded. You can all do whatever you're going to do. I'm staying. And I made that commitment. I made that commitment to my emotional, my spiritual, and my physical well-being, man. You know, and that's a result of the desperation that I felt. See, my bottom came in the back of a police car one more time, man. Like, you know, that's the only way I've ever gotten clean is concrete and iron. That's the only way I've ever gotten clean, is to no longer have the choice to go chase the drug. Like, when I could no longer have access to it, I was able to get clean, get a little clear-minded, you know, maybe consider that maybe the drugs were the problem and that I might be able to do something different with my life. And, like, what happened for me in this bottom is that I had been, the cops had been chasing me, trying to bust me at my mom's house for stolen goods. I was a bicycle thief in Huntington Beach, California, and about 10 miles down the road there's a place called Newport Beach, California, which is a resort town. And like, I would take 3 to 5 high-end mountain bikes a night. I did that for 5 years. They raided my mom's house 3 times trying to burn me for stolen property, but they couldn't prove that anything I took was stolen. Because, see, I don't know if any of you guys are here or old enough to remember, but, you know, when I was a kid, my parents would take me to the fire department, and we'd go get that little blue sticker that you would put on your bicycle to show that it was registered with the fire department, right? Well, all you had to do is take stuff that didn't have a sticker. And there was no proof that it was anybody's but mine, and I didn't buy it at a swap meet. You know, and the cops would come and they'd inventory everything that was there. Last time they came through, there was like 112 antique bicycles at my mom's house, and a whole bunch of other stuff, you know, and you know, the last time, like what went down that night, see, when I did that case in 1980, and I got introduced to NA, I went through that whole court case, and my sentence got, you know, down to where I think it was like 8 months or something, and I did my time and I came out, and the whole atmosphere on the street had changed for me. All of a sudden, I was like some big freaking happy tough guy because I had gone and done my time. I didn't roll on anybody, and I rode that for the next 15 years. Like, that was a big part of my self-esteem, was that I wasn't a rat. And like what happened on March 31st of 1995, that night, the cops had been chasing after me, trying to catch me doing some stupid shit. I had traded a 7 or 8 high-end mountain bikes for a 1951 International step van that was converted into a motorhome. You know, I mean, perfect tweakmobile, right? And I was working on it in my mom's driveway, and I decided I needed to turn it around so I could work on something else. And this vehicle had never stalled. Like, I owned it for about 9 months, and it never stalled. It ran perfect. Like, it was a nice rig. And I pulled it out of the driveway so I could do the 180 and turn it around, and I got it out in the street, and it stalled. And I looked to my left, and coming from down the end of the street is this cop car hauling ass with no lights on. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And like, I've never been a runner. Like, I don't run when the police are involved. You know, when they show up, I pop out of the car, stand on the curb. What can I do for you today? How's your day going? Blah, blah, blah. You know, like, I'm a con man. That's what I do. You know, I bullshit with my way through most anything. And this whole thing goes down. I jump out. The cop goes, well, Mike, what are you up to tonight? You have any dope on you? And I'm like, no, sure don't. And I had, like, 30 minutes before, one of the guys that I had working for me came by and paid me a 1/16 of speed that he owed me. And I had it in my pocket. And when my hand landed on my pocket, I went, oh, shit. And the cop reached right in that pocket. He goes, well, apparently you do. He goes, guess where you're going tonight? And I went, okay, all right, well, can I pull my vehicle back in the driveway? And he says, no, that's going to the yard. We're impounding it. And at that time, they had changed the impound laws to where any time something gets impounded, it has a 30-day hold on it. And, you know, at $150 a day, it gets pretty expensive. So I'm like, oh, shit, blah, 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 right? They put me in the back of the cop car. I'm sitting on my cuffs. You know, got kind of comfortable in that position after a while. And they pulled my mom out of the house. And by now, there's like 3 or 4 other units there. And a couple of my friends are hauling bike shit back in the garage. And my mom's at the curb, and they tell my mom, Ms. Mullenberg, if your son comes back after he gets released and stays at your house, you know that we will find stolen goods here eventually. And when we do, we're going to confiscate your home under the zero tolerance law. And I watched my mom's heart break. And she looked in at me in the cop car and she said, son, you can't come home anymore. You have to go somewhere else. I'm not losing my home over you. And you see, this is a lady that, when I was 13, she divorced my dad because my dad was a compulsive gambler. My father would pawn stuff and then come home with, you know, shitloads of money and then go months and months without contributing to the rent or the household. And my mom basically raised my sister and I on her own. And she finally got tired of it after 23 years of marriage and cut him loose. Changed the locks on the house and you know, that was it. And so she struggled and she fought to keep a roof over the head, over my head, over my sister's head, you know, to give us a place where we could grow and become good human beings. And my actions and my behavior, you know, eventually became too much for her to bear. And what happened in my bottom, like it happened right there. Like after she said that, you know, I looked out past her and I saw the cops, and this is, you know, 2:45 in the morning, and I'm seeing what's going on, and I realized, like, I'm 32 years old, and this is what my life has become. And I just went, oh, fuck. And I leaned back, and I remember, you know, when I got clean, they were talking about, you know, your higher power can be a light bulb. You know, it can be a doorknob. It can be anything you want. It's up to you to decide what it is. And I leaned back and I looked at the dome light of the cop car and I said, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And I remembered coming to Narcotics Anonymous 15 years before. You know, and I remembered like feeling comfortable with the way people cussed. And I remembered, you know, feeling comfortable being here, you know, being amongst you people. And I said, okay, God, I'll give it everything I got. And I immediately felt a sense of peace. Like I immediately knew everything was going to be okay. And I felt that peace for the following 9 days. For 9 full days while I was in jail, going through court proceedings, you know. Like as soon as they booked me in and I got to my spot, like I slept. I slept for the first time in like 7 years. Like I slept. You know, I really slept. And I felt peace, and I understood that I was going to be okay. You know, and I haven't known that level of peace. It was so intense. I haven't known that since then. You know, but I now know that what was happening for me was I was in the presence of my higher power. Like at that point in time, like for that period of time, like I got a break, I got a chance to sleep, and I got to understand what was really going on in my life. And I went to, like I had some time, I think 36 days or something to serve on the possession charge, and I went to a couple of H&I meetings, and I got our little white booklet, and I had it in my back pocket, and I grabbed some of these pamphlets, and I had them in my back pocket, and you know what, I'd read them all the time while I was, you know, like next few days that I had left to finish off, man. And, you know, I called my dad, who was living down here in San Diego County, and I told him what went down, and you know, look, like I need someplace to go. I can't go to Mom's anymore, and I need to get a new start. And he said, well, you're welcome to come stay with me, but you got to stay clean, and I want you to go to meetings. And see, my mom, what gave her the strength to kick me out that night was that about a week prior to that, she had called the NA hotline, and she had talked to somebody about what was going on with me. She had been exposed because I had asked her to bring me to some meetings over the course of that 15 years when I was trying to beat cases and stuff, you know, like that's what I did. And so like they told her, like, look, you're enabling him. You got to get him to you know, feel the full weight of his consequences. You have to be, you know, you have to stand up to your feelings about, you know, what may or may not happen. And like she understood that, you know, she finally reached that point. So as a result of the desperation that I felt in the realization of that life, man, like where I was, like I didn't want to be that way anymore, man. Like I knew 9 years before I got clean that using was the problem. Like I knew that, like I remember, I got clean at 32 years old. And I remember when I was like 23, 24, I remember going, fuck, if I could just stop using, maybe my life would change. You know, like maybe something would happen different. And like I would try, like I would seriously try. You know, I'd get busted and I'd do a little time, and I would feel okay for the time that I was, you know, away from the environment and away from my choices when I was locked up. And I'd come out like, you know, feeling good and ready to go, and I would return to the same thing because like I didn't know what else to do. You know, like I would always end up in the same crowds with the same people, and maybe the faces were different, But, you know, I'd get some job and be okay for a minute, and then, you know, next thing you know, like I'm telling myself it's okay to drink. You know, and for me, like, I don't know what it's like for anybody else, but I'm not capable of satisfaction. That's an impossibility for me. Even with 20 years clean, like, I have to convince myself that I'm freaking satisfied. Satisfaction is an illusion to an addict. It's an impossibility, you know? Like, we always want something better. We always want something that's over there. We have the hardest time in the world caring for what's right here. You know, and I can talk to you about that. Like, I'm the guy that's owned like 5 surfboards at a time. You know, for the last 10 years, I've had at least 4 cars all the time. And I justify, well, I'm buying them and selling them and, you know, fixing them up. And no, I just like to, like, fuck around with different cars. Sometimes I like to go out in the yard and go, I think I'll drive that one today. You know, but I can't just build one. You know, I got to have the motorcycle. I got to have the badass bicycle and 2 or 3 other ones. You know, I got to have 9,000 CDs. And now that we have, like, music that's you know, not physical, it's MP3s and shit, I got 37,000 MP3s. Like, you know, you can't be, it's like satisfaction is an illusion. You know, and the more that I stay in touch with that fact, the more I can have respect for what I've already earned. Okay? Because my life before I got clean, the only thing I earned was my consequences. I didn't earn any of the physical stuff because I took it. I used to have a joke. I'd go like wandering around the neighborhood or, you know, in a car, a bicycle, freaking walking or whatever, and I'd see something I'd like and I'd go, mine. I'd just call whatever I liked mine. If it was in your possession, it wasn't going to be for very long. See, I learned at a very young age that if you want to be a good crook, you do it all by yourself. You don't have anybody available to rat you off. You do it all by yourself. And that's what I did. And I was pretty damn successful at it for a long time. The part I wasn't successful at was dealing with my feelings. See, because I believe that when we're that age, like that young lady over there, you know, or when we're like my buddy, son Sean, you know, when we're at those ages, like, we're perfect. You know, we learn, like, we're born into life perfect as human beings, okay? Yeah, maybe we might have some other stuff going on, but we're corrupted. You know, and we as addicts, we have that extra little thing called the disease of addiction. It tells us it's okay to do the wrong thing for the wrong reason, okay? But our parents never have a clue. They don't know. We as parents don't know if that's the way that they're going to be. You know, so we have to, like, try to teach them to do the right thing for the right reason, and ultimately, because they're human beings, they have their own choice. And that's the difficult part about the disease of addiction and dealing with it in others. I have 2 nieces that are now 21 and 23, and like, one of them is an old soul, very old soul, and very peaceful and understanding, and the other one's just as much her Uncle Mike as I am, you know. She's going to do what the fuck she wants to do when she wants to do it. And, you know, I pray for both of them all the time, man, because they got each other no matter what. Now I want to talk a little bit about my experience with the 12 steps in our literature, because I believe it's really important, man. You see, my brain is mechanical by nature. Like, I take shit apart to figure out why it works. Today, I put it back together again. But, like, you know, in the past, that didn't happen so much. You know, now, like I spring this up because, like, when I showed up in Narcotics Anonymous, and I made that commitment to my misunderstanding of a higher power, like, that I'll give it my best shot. Like, I showed up here and I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to know what happens, what goes on, man. And I got into our literature. You know, at the time that I got clean, there were 3 tradition meetings a week in North Coastal area of Narcotics Anonymous. And I would go sit in all of those, and I would learn about the traditions, man, and I would hang out with those people that were talking about them. And I read about our stuff, and I got a sponsor right away, and I started working steps, and I actually went through 3 sponsors before I got the one that worked steps with me, that really had the balls to tell me to sit down and shut the fuck up, and I might get to stay clean another day. Because when I came in here, man, I was a vibrating ball of hate. Like, I was not a happy soul, man. I was desperate and terrified. Every other word was a cuss word. I did not care about you. I barely cared enough about me. That's just the nature of where the disease brought me. And, I started learning about Narcotics Anonymous. So there's this old dude named Sluggo who passed away. Unfortunately, he didn't get to die clean, but he did get to stay clean for a while during his life. He had a passion for Narcotics Anonymous, and especially outreach. And when I got clean, like within a week of me arriving in North County, this dude snatched me up, and like we were going to meetings, 2 and 3 meetings a day. And we were doing outreach service work, and we were going out and checking on meetings and making sure that, asking them questions about how they were applying the 12 traditions in these particular meetings, and how they were trying to, maintain an atmosphere of recovery. And like, it was really beneficial. Like, I got to talk to this man about the traditions all the time. When I got the sponsor that I was real comfortable with, that told me, that I was going to die if I didn't stay clean. Like, we started working steps. In my first meeting with that guy, I showed up at his place, and I sat on his couch, and I had my books because my dad had bought them for me, and he started to tell me, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And I would be like, okay, why? And after about the 3rd why, he goes, man, check this out, dude. Like, there's 90 other guys that want that spot on my couch. And if you don't start asking how, one of them's going to get it. He wasn't that nice about it. He used a lot more cuss words and basically told me that, I didn't have a chance if I didn't sit down and shut up and pay attention. And I understood, I could, though his language was very rough, I could understand where he's coming from. That man always, he would cuss me out and then tell me he loved me. And then pretty soon I stopped doing the things that would make him want to cuss me out. And I started learning more about the 12 steps, and I started writing. Like, we did a lot of writing, we did a lot of reading. When I first got to Narcotics Anonymous, like, I couldn't read, I couldn't understand the first paragraph, the first sentence in a paragraph without reading it 3 times. And so, like, he'd tell me, okay, we'd sit down and read through, and it works how and why, the first step together. And he'd go, okay, I want you to read it 5 more times, and, on your own. I read it, the first step out of each book every day for a month because I needed that saturation. Like, I needed to, like, continue to read so I could understand, because I really wanted to understand. Because, see, when I got here, I believed in you guys, man. Like, I believe the way that we treat each other in Narcotics Anonymous, we greet each other with a hug. People actually take a minute when they say, how are you doing? They don't go, how are you doing? And then like this. They say, how are you doing? And then they look you in the eye, and they listen for a minute. And I've had people go, you know what, bro? I'm sorry, but I don't have time to tell you. But I know that by your asking that you love me, and thank you. And like, that doesn't happen at work. People I work with for 5 years don't do stuff like that. It doesn't happen in other civic organizations. It never happened to me in any of the religious locations that I attended over the course of my lifetime, and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of service when I was a kid in those places. And as I became a young adult. Narcotics Anonymous is the only place I've ever felt the kind of love that you people like share with me. I can walk into a meeting anywhere. I believe anywhere on the planet, but I've experienced anywhere on the West Coast, and I can sit down, and like, there's been a couple times where I was an arrogant prick, and I walked into meetings where I was an out-of-towner, and I'd walk in and I'd sit down and not say anything to anybody, not try to make eye contact with anybody, because I wanted to test whether or not you guys would come up and like say hello. I wanted to test your recovery. You know, I thought I was some hot shit in recovery. And you know what that got me? Ignored. Pretty much exactly what I wanted to find out is if you don't reach out yourself, people are going to feel like maybe that guy just wants a little space. You know? And like I've learned that for me, like my first sponsor taught me, like, dude, like, make the newcomer feel welcome. Walk up and say hello. You know, take a second to look them in the eye and listen to them when they tell you. Even if they're batshit crazy, because you were when you got here. You know? I mean, that's the truth. Listen, like, one of the funniest things that I think like, happens is when I hear somebody that tells me, you know, I got asked to speak and I'm going to go and speak in front of these people and stuff, is like they get nervous. And maybe I have a lack of empathy, but because I don't really experience that. But a big reason why I don't experience that, and please don't take this wrong, or maybe if you need to, go ahead, but we're trying to impress each other? Are you fucking kidding me? And seriously. You know, who we are is the only people on the planet that can help each other. You know? Scientists can't help us. Clergy members can't help us. The reason why this works is because the language of empathy, man. I can look in each and every one of your eyes and know that you felt the same level of desperation that I felt that night in the back of the car praying to the freaking dome light in that cop car. I know without a doubt. When I talk to you people and I look at you, and some of you I get to know, and you know some maybe I will get to know, like I know that when I talk to you that you know what it's like to want to be done using, to not be able to stop. To go through that desperation of using against your own will. Like I know that we have been through that. Like there's no doubt, man. That's what makes me feel comfortable here. Like I don't forget that. My sponsor used to tell me, man, don't forget where you came from. He used to tell me all the time, man, Mike, do not forget where you came from. You remember where your bottom happened. Remember what the walls looked like, what the air smelled like, what you were wearing, whether or not you showered, what you used. Remember that. Because, see, that's where the miracle freaking occurred that allowed you to come and enjoy this kind of miracle. I remember that, man. The first step is, like, to me, like one of the most incredible things. Like, you see, I've experienced a lot in my life. I've seen a lot of stuff that human beings should not see. I've seen some pretty horrific things, and I used to be very, very afraid of my thinking. I used to be horrified because the things that I would think, you know, dangerous. I mean, we're talking like dismemberment and like serious harm and murder and all these kind of very morbid fantasies that I had as a result of the things I've experienced. And when I got here and my first sponsor started like me on this path to understanding the first step, that we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and our lives had become unmanageable. Like when that was shared with me, like, you know, the first thing he said is, what do you think addiction is? I said, well, it's speed and cocaine, heroin, and alcohol, and various combinations of those things. He said, no, Mike. He told me, he goes, have you ever walked by a bush and had a rig fly out of it, stick you in the neck, and push its own plunger? I said, no. He goes, have you ever woke up with a bottle pouring itself down your mouth? No. Have you ever found yourself in a cloud of weed smoke without the ability to run away from it anyway? No. You see, all those things are at the end of my arms, man. The problem is my choice to use. I've been clean several times throughout my life. Not by my own choice, but I have been clean several times throughout my life. When my choice was restored to me, I made the choice to get loaded the first time. After that, I'm using it against my will because I have the disease of addiction that tells me it's okay to do the wrong thing for the wrong reason. You see? It's my thinking that's the problem. Cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, alcohol, wasting money, violence, skullduggery, intimidation, sex inappropriately. All those things are symptoms that indicate that something is wrong. They are not the problem themselves. They are the result of the problem. And that made sense to me. That made sense to me. See, what that means is I can act better than I think. I don't have to act on my first thought. And see, and when I take that a little further, and I go, well, if I'm not guilty of my first thought, but what I'm responsible for is my actions, then my first thought doesn't matter. So I don't have to judge that first thought. My value as a person is not based in my thinking. What you know about me is based in my actions, because that's all you see. And you're damn lucky. That's where the freedom lies. The freedom of that first step lies in the value of the fact that I am not responsible for my thinking. And my actions are all that matter. And I'm not judged by my thinking, man. I'm judged by my actions. There's such tremendous freedom in that. You know, from that I get to go on and learn about a higher power of my own understanding. And I get to build that relationship and take that path and then carry that path even further into the commitment that it takes in the third step to go on to the fourth step. And why even waste your time on a fourth step if you're not going to do a fifth? Because by now I've trusted my sponsor because I've been working with them for, the prior 4 steps. In 6, I get to understand the exact nature of my wrongs and what it is about them so I can become familiar with them. And 7, I find the path how to get to their spiritual opposite. And then in 8, I get to acknowledge the harm I've caused. 9, I get to correct it by learning how to act different. That's what making amends are about. In 10, I just continue the process on a daily basis. In 11, I work a little harder to communicate with my higher power. In 12, I'm here doing it right now. And I do it every time I answer one of my sponsees' phone calls. Or somebody I don't know who is on the phone. Or when I show up at a meeting and I don't say a damn thing. That's a hard one for me. Narcotics Anonymous has changed my life, man, but only because I put the effort into it. And my effort comes directly from the desperation that I heard shared about earlier from the lady who was taking the cake. That desperation is what it's all about, man. And I have to preserve that desperation and use it as fuel to fire my recovery, to fire my effort, man. That's why I remember the back of that cop car, man, all the time. All the time. Because that's who I am. That's where I come from. If I get loaded one time. See, I thought of this funny analogy. When I was 13, I got curious. I'm a normal human man. I got curious and tried on one of my sister's dresses. God damn, I'm an ugly woman. I look horrible in a dress. And you know what? The analogy in that is that's exactly how it is when I get loaded. Other people can use those things. And they might look okay in them. But not me. I can't wear getting loaded and look good. I look like shit in a dress. That's all I have to share.